Hey, so following up from the previous video, we were talking about Frappe AI, and I had shown you, I've given you a brief overview of how do you implement your AI clients, how do you implement your OCR processes, how do you implement your RAG pipelines, everything that was there already. I think there are a few new concepts introduced, such as AI agents, for which we already have a separate markdown file which you could follow. It's essentially just like every other agents, but there are some Frappe specific tools which the agents could have access to, and that's something that we'll talk about later on in this video. The primary purpose of this video is to so on the previous video, and as response to my LinkedIn post which I had made about this repository, there was a feedback from people coming in that, hey, you've put out so many features in your application, but there's no one way to implement it end to end. I mean, they were looking to they were looking for ways to implement all of these use cases for a production ready instance, and that's what we'll be doing in this video. You're probably looking at a few differences here from the previous videos repository. The first one is that this is on this repository we literally have 0 stars, and the commits have been reset to 6 as of now. I mean, previously there were around 50-55 commits and around 20 some stars, but whatever. There was a reason which I would like to reveal in some of my later videos. Basically, it was some legal trouble that I had to face in the last week. Uh, I'll probably walk you through what happened related to this issue later on. But right now, let's focus on how do we configure this repository to work for your production ready workflows, and how do you start with that. What we'll do is we have already ran a bench start here, so I should get access to my bench here. The first thing that I'd like to do is to configure our OCR processes. For that, I think we already have something like document AI settings. I've already configured most of this in the previous video, so it's already here. Um, I'll walk you through everything else here. Okay, the next thing that we do after configuring it from our AI settings, so you essentially get your project ID and your processor ID from your Google Cloud console. You'll have to log into console.cloud.google.com and go over to your buckets in order to get your bucket name, and then you'll have to create a service account by going over to your uh, IAM, identity access management or service accounts. There's a separate section for that. We created two separate service accounts and provided access that correlates with my document AI plus some of those access which relates to my cloud buckets. I'll also walk you through how do you train your preprocessors and how do you make them specific to your business use cases. Um, for now, once this configuration is done, you'll head over to OCR process list. Um, I'd like to add a new OCR process. Now you get two functions here, two processing modes. There are just two fields that you can modify. One is uh, that you can use to attach whatever file that you would like to perform an OCR on. So I would like to have an OCR process on, say, um, this one, right? I'll upload this file and it will get attached to this document. Now there are two processing modes. The process would begin as soon as I click on start processing. These two modes, okay? Wait, I'm just getting a call. I'll get back to you. Hey, back at it. So we were talking about processing modes. There are two processing modes which the OCR process supports. There's a synchronous mode and then there's an asynchronous mode. The essential difference between the two modes is that you use synchronous for processing smaller documents with two or three or four, maximum five number of pages, as this could be an instantaneous process. The second one, the asynchronous, is supposed to be used for long form documents, which could range from, say, tens of pages to maybe thousands of pages. I've tried processing around 1500 pages of documents in this asynchronous process as well. So that works pretty fine. And that's obviously production ready, because there are a few instances where we have come across PDFs which could range from a few hundred pages to a few thousands, 3 to 4 thousand pages at max that I've seen so far. So let me just show you how it works. I'll select the synchronous one first, and I'll attach a small PDF here. Let's select. So all of these are 500-page PDFs. I'll walk you through. I've already prepared this for a reason. But for now, I'll just go back to my invoices and click on this. Okay, this is a simple receipt from one of my Uber rides. I'll click on start processing, and this would freeze your screen so that the response of that API is uh, fetched from their servers, and you instantly get a response for that. It's a long response, as you see here. There's a lot of data. If you want to uh, know more about the internals of OCR processes, you can analyze all of this data, but there's uh, the data that you actually need, you would be finding it on top here. So congrats, you got a discount, or whatever the actual data was. But for every character that the OCR is able to recognize from whatever document you have uploaded, they send you a bunch of fields along with that: start index, end index, content, confidence for every field. I mean, for every character that the OCR model has recognized. Then a lot of anchors here, code language, bounding polygons. So it's an exact replica of how your document will look. Plus it also has a base 64 version of your PDF. So you see the string starting from here. This is an image version of the PDF that you have uploaded. So if you decode this base 64 using some encoder or decoder that you can find online, you'll see that it's an exact image replica of the PDF that you had uploaded. Um, all right, that was the synchronous process. Let me just show you an asynchronous one as well. So wait, let me just split one of these PDFs, because I want one of these 500-page PDF. I want to split it from 1 to, say, 10 or 5. I don't want to take the process to be longer than what I can show you here. All right, I'll name it 5 pages ERPNext, and I'll try to upload this here. The mode is asynchronous. I mean, it doesn't even matter. You just have to upload your file, and it would start the process once you click on that start processing button. 5-page ERPNext, upload. This is asynchronous. You will start the process. Now you get a prompt here that I mean, you won't be able to see that, right? But you get a prompt that this has been queued as a background process, and a worker would soon pick this up. And you also see that the status has updated to processing. In your output, you would get the output to your Google Clouds bucket URIs for both input and output. You'll also get in return a process name, which Google's APIs would return, and you can inspect this process name later on. There's a hook that I have created in my hooks.py, which would essentially poll the Google server every 5 minutes to check for what all jobs have been completed based on this process name. And once that job is complete, it will fetch the output here. But if you don't want to wait for that, I mean, you can just directly run a bench execute on this function, and as soon as the output is ready, you'll get the response here. So it's still processing. Meanwhile, I'll also show you how you configure your OCR processors. So I'll go back to document AI, my processors. You can choose from a, you get an option to create a custom processor. I'll just walk you through the basic steps. So there are four categories which you can use: custom extractor, classifier, splitter, and summarizer. For this use case, I've used custom extractor, but there's an entire gallery of preprocessor that's already available. If one of those processor matches your use case, I think it's somewhere here. Yep. If it's a very versatile gallery, if one of these processors match your use case, go check this out. Or if you want to have a very high very high accuracy to your OCR processes, I would recommend that you create your own custom preprocessor and train that model based on the inputs that you are going to give to that in the coming future. So the way you do that is you follow a bunch of steps after you click on create processor. You give it a name, select the bucket that you would be using here, just like I'm using um, this one, sampling bucket here. So you would also need to mention that somewhere here, right? If I click on create, I think it's going to ask for that bucket when you import your documents, right? So I've created this preprocessor. You can see that from the name. What you do is you click on get started and define a basic schema of what all fields do you want to fetch. What I would do is I would import a document from my Google Cloud bucket, pick up sampling here, um, and select this. All right. That's how you define a basic schema. And then you put a bunch of other documents to train your model based on the given schema. And then once that training is done, you get a score of how well your model performs. So the way you do that mapping is you create a label name. This could be customer name or something like that. The method is going to be extract plain text, and this is going to be optional for multiples. We want to create this field, and for extracting this, I'll click on this cursor, and so you see the customer name, it has already recognized. It's the power of Google's document AI models. You can create similar fields, or you can also uh, extract a predefined schema based on um, when you click on this function and upload one of your documents. I'll just show you that it can also there are pre-optimized processors to extract all of the valid fields from your document, and you can give them a custom prompt that okay, extract the total invoice amount and customer name from the document, and this would essentially generate the schema with two fields. That's what I'm assuming. Let's see if this is done. So yep, this is complete. uh, we are able to extract a lot of data from here as well. As you can see, there is a lot of text here. It's a long output, and essentially what you do is, in order to get this is a structured form of the PDF that you had uploaded. So what you would do is you would write a function on one of your backend services that would ingest all of this data and give you whatever fields that you specify here. So the schema that you give here, right? You see, total invoice amount and customer name. I would apply this schema and I would test it on one of those documents. It's really intuitive to use. I mean, it's not like anything that's difficult for anyone who's working around these parameters or changes. What you do is you go to label and build, and you import some documents to test it out. Okay. uh, there are four options. You can essentially put your all of your data to training and then separately to testing, or you can import all of the data at once and then split those documents into 80% training and 20% testing, or you can even uh, do that in a custom format. I mean, you can keep 50 split between training and testing data while giving unassigned to this, and then you can continue with start labeling. And then as you click on start labeling, I'd like to show you this on my previous processor. Okay. No. So for this one, you'll see if I click on evaluate and test, there are already a lot of documents that I've already imported from my Google Cloud bucket. The way that I had already shown, there's an option to import documents, and you link your uh, bucket here and you import all of those documents again. So all of these documents were imported, and I had trained one of those models on one of those existing pre-processors, and there's an option to auto label all of these documents so that you can reduce some of your manual work here. um, I mean, that's pretty straightforward if you look at it from an end user's perspective. You train that preprocessor, and then essentially in the end you deploy it. Evaluate and test, there's an option to upload test document. This I would like to do on the one that I was using. So you'll click on evaluate and test and upload your document. I'll pick up this one. Let's see what's the output. Right, so you get two outputs here. The customer name has been extracted and the total invoice amount is here. You would get exactly these two field names in your response. Your job is to extract those field names in a structured way so that it could be used on your Frappe instances. For example, what you could do is you could train one of your preprocessors to extract your customers invoices, and then you can ingest all of those invoices, capturing their image or uploading them as a PDF. And the response of that OCR process would give you the exact field names that you have considered on your Google Document AI preprocessors. Um, so that's pretty much it. You'll also get confidence scores of how well the models are performing. It essentially depends on how well you train them, what's the accuracy of the data that you're giving that model as training data. And then it also depends on how well you're manually labeling it, and how well you're eliminating the chances of errors when it's selected to auto label the documents. That's pretty much about optical recognition, OCRs. Okay, right. I've shown two processes here. The next thing is a RAG pipeline. I'd like to take a small break before we continue to that. Hey, got back with a coffee. Let's get back to our RAG pipeline, right? It's so one of my previous organizations had requested me to create a RAG pipeline such that any user working across ERPNext or Frappe related components, they would get upon asking, obviously, they would get accurate responses to their queries. For example, there have been different versions of ERPNext since the last say 10 years, and there have been massive upgrades to all of those versions. I mean, nobody knows on what model your GPT models or your Claude models have been trained on, and what data, what documentation were they fed when they were being trained. So they have kind of an incomplete end-to-end exposure to the documentation that's available there. So what I did was I wrote a script. I would also like to show you that script. um, by the way, there's also a function which would clear all of those documents from your Google Cloud storage, so that even if your business scales beyond a point when document storage becomes a bottleneck, it would clean it up for you. We'll talk about this later. So there was a repository called docs. Yep. So I had written a script. What it would do is, I would like to walk you through the docs for ERPNext first. So if you go to docs.frappe.io, and if you check out the documentation for ERPNext, why is it not loading? So for all of the production ready sites, there's a sitemap that's available which would crawl through the entire site and give you what all web links are available to navigate in your browser, right? So you get an introduction to ERPNext, and then there are a lot of components here. Whatever information that you would ever need related to ERPNext would be here, available here on their documentations page, right? So my goal was to extract all of this data in form of PDF so that it could be ingested in your RAG pipeline, and then that pipeline would be connected to a model which would also ingest your similarity search results, and then it would give you accurate results based on the user query. The way I did that was, I'll show you. If you go to the network tab and you try to export this page, you'll get certain options here. What I did was I tried to click on this download button. There's a URL that gets fired, which would essentially create a PDF out of this page, um, and you'll get to download that PDF. So this is the URL that I took off from this request, and then I also took off the payload. So this is Frappe, the application name for which you need the documentation, slash the topic name, and you'll find all of these uh, routes in your sitemap. So if I open up the sitemap, you'll see that there are references to this URL, right? Okay. So what the script did was it would scrap your sitemap. It would take up that base URL for using which you generate your PDFs, and it would hit that base API with all the URLs that are available on your sitemap in order to download the entire documentation. So it would save this record on my download slash ERPNext docs directory. There are 12 workers that I put out to work in parallel so that it's done pretty quickly, but I'd like to show you how it works, right? So I'll say Python script.py, and you see there are around 4,000 or 5,000, as far as I remember, uh, number of documents which the sitemap was able to scrap from the website. Why is it not loading? Okay, 4330 ERPNext pages, and it will keep downloading, hitting the URL back to back. Why is it slow? I mean, I shouldn't be in trouble. I'm not trying to like imitate a DDoS attack or anything, Rushabh. I don't want to get into another trouble. So I'll just like to stop it here, and I mean that's how it works. That's the only thing that I wanted to showcase. Uh, so the directory that you see here on my downloads, this one, the ERPNext docs, this was the directory that was just created when I ran that script, and this was the directory. So I had continued that script to run for a couple of hours, and then there were around 4,000 files that I had on my local. Then I used one of those PDF tools to combine all of those documentation. So you see this one PDF around 100 MBs. This is all of ERPNext. It would contain around 3,000 pages, right? And it's the entire documentation of ERPNext end to end. uh, it's slowing down my PC somehow, but yep, that's everything that ERPNext's documentation site has ever put on the internet. So this is the closest replica of how you would train your model once you have all the data together. What I did next was I split this in parts of 500 pages, so that would make around 6 or 8 different documents here. So you see one to 500 pages in the first PDF, and then so on and so forth. Then later on, what I did was I went to my RAG settings and configured that RAG settings. This configuration I think I had already shown in the previous video. Next you create a RAG document, sorry, RAG data source. I've created this data source, selected the source type as PDF, and this would create an index called ERPNext docs. Next, I would go to rag data source, sorry, documents list, and then there are six documents that I've created. At this point of time, on the last stage, I ran out of credits for processing. So you'll see embedded content requests per day, per user, per model, per project, free tier, quota dimensions were exhausted or whatever. But I ran out of tokens, and that's the reason why this job failed. But the others continued. I'll just like to show you how all of these files are working. So I'll open up one of these PDFs, and I'll randomly ask a question because all of these PDFs have already been indexed. So you get a status here as indexed, right? Um, what I would do is I would randomly ask a question: delivery note negative stock error. Uh, when submitting a delivery note, receiving a message says item stock is insufficient, but we have item stocks available in warehouse. Okay, let me just search for something similar. um, I'll go to rag data source. That's the origin of your knowledge base for any rag pipelines that you create. You don't want to index now because it will run the entire index process uh, for all of these documents, right? So whatever documents that you have here, all of them have a backlink to your data source, and whenever you run that index now operation, it would process it for all the linked documents. For now, I'd like to ask a simple question. I'm getting insufficient, if I could type it correctly. I think sufficient stock while canceling my delivery note. How to fix? Okay. Now, if you ask the same question to any of your LLM models, it would uh, essentially, I mean, it would recognize from my history because I'm using ERPNext. But if I try to show you on an incognito tab, it would ask me what system are you using. Oh, it has. Uh, I mean, how did it know? I've opened it on an incognito tab. But yeah, I think delivery note is something that's subjective to ERPNext, so that's the reason why it's picking that up. But it's really vague and out of date answer. What you would get here is straight from the documentation that we have just ingested. Uh, you can go through the answer. The provided context explains that insufficient stock errors typically occur while submitting a delivery note. That's what we read, right? While submitting a delivery note. Yep. So it's semantically right, as well as it's similarity wise, it's absolutely correct. So the chunking is working well. The context engineering is also working fine. I think I don't have any complaints with that. That's one example of how you process a rag pipeline, how you implement a rag pipeline for your production instances. Um, in a similar way, what you can do is you can have rag data sources for multiple teams across your business. So there could be a data source for, say, your financial consultants, which would in who would be asking questions related to finances of your company. So what you can do is you can ingest your balance sheets, or you can ingest your payment dues or bad debt that you have on your liability accounts, and then you can question and answer, play around with that data. Um, that's the second thing that I had wanted to talk about. I think we'd already seen all of this. So there's one thing that's remaining, which is about agents. So let me give you a quick walkthrough of that. There's an agent list. If you create your first agent, it would like to have a name. Let's give it a name for, say, tasks manager. There's a concept in Frappe called to do. If you don't know, it's a very basic application. It's a very basic doc type that you can create to manage your day-to-day tasks, right? um, I don't want to give it a description at this point in time, but then I like to create a client. I think agents are not supported by Gemini clients, so we'll have to create a new client here. um, Anthropic, OpenAI, GPT 4o. Yeah, that works. API key. I don't want to log in. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You just create your AI client from one of OpenAI or Anthropic, and then you create an agent. You link that. Wait, you link that AI client to your agent. Specify name here, max iterations, max tokens, temperature, agent prompt. I think I've already created a prompt here, but you can give a system prompt here in ways in which your agent would perform. And then there are a bunch of tools that I have configured here. So if you go to tools.py, there are a couple of tools that we already have here, right? So all of these functions, each of these functions are performing as a separate tool, the access to which have already been given to your agent when you click this option, allow all tools. When you uncheck this, you get a child table where you can specify what all tools you want to give access to. So you see there are all of these tools available. Create document, update document, submit document. I think I'd like to have, for an agent related to my finance agent, I'd like to give access to run reports, and I would save it. It won't allow me, I guess, right? Yep, it's configured for Google. Yep. I mean, yeah, that's the only example. You can save this one. Wait a sec. Let me just try to configure this for OpenAI. Yeah, whatever. And I think this would work. Yep. That's a play around, by the way. This is not the right thing to do. But then you would get an option to chat, and you can put your messages here. It would uh, initialize a long running process in your background, and then you can always I mean, this is the synchronous way you interact with the agent, but there are also options to get some sort of a button here or here on your throughout your desk, so that you can access your agent across your Frappe sites. There's a separate agents.md file which would walk you through the entire process. So there is I think there was a file that I had created here. Let me just see where that is. Okay, so agent chat.js, right? Chat.js. We also have agent launcher.js, right? So what I would do is I would run bench build, right, and then bench migrate. I don't think we needed a migrate process there, but anyways, all right. So we have our agents configured, right? We have already created an agent here. You would ask a question, it would throw a response. Obviously has no model selected because it does not support uh, agents. That's the reason we don't have it for Gemini, but I would like to showcase that in a follow-up video. The reason why we can't do it right now is that we don't have a login for our open API platform. Or even if I go to, say, Anthropic platform, I want to sign in. If I have credits, I'll show you. No, we don't have. We don't have any credits. I'll just go ahead and add a few credits here, and then I'd like to showcase how agents work. I think I ran out of all of those credits while testing. But anyways, that's an overview of the entire end-to-end workflow of how everything that relates to your agent agent's work. Um, I'd like to have your inputs on what all features we can have related to your AI related operations that you would like to have on your day-to-day basis. I'd like to add all of those features on top of the just existing repository. Um, Yep, that's pretty much it. I'd also explore myself what all features are available out there on the internet, which people from everywhere are trying to implement inside those ERP Next applications. Every day I come across a new uh, LinkedIn post where someone is creating something new on top of their ERP Next desk. And most of these implementations, I mean, almost all of these implementations are related to how agents are working and how an agent is interacting with your ERP Next application, processing your documents, submitting, canceling, all of that basic stuff. I want to go beyond those basic operations, and I want to reduce manual work, which most of these companies are having nowadays. So every time a new project is onboarded for any of these companies, the first thing is to get their business documents ready, right? And there's a huge role that the consultants play. I would like to have something like some sort of an agent that uh, reduces their work, and even they enhances the skills of the developers, so that they can directly interact with that agent, and they can get to talk to the client more directly in order to understand their business requirements. So I mean, there could be an implementation for a rack pipeline which would ingest your wait a sec ingest your ERP Next documentation, and it would understand the client's requirements, that what the business requires, and then it would suggest the best suiting solution for their own business. So I'd like to have an agent for that, for sure. Let me see how are we going to create a tool for that. But then any time you would like to extend this agents feature, you can have your own tools, just like we have it here on our tools.py. You can maybe import this, or add your own tools as part of fixtures or anything. But yeah, that's pretty much about this video. Let me know what all feedback you would like to give, and let's continue working and building Frappe and ERP Next to be better products. All right. Thank you. Bye bye.